y'all are doing that, I want to welcome everybody to our virtual field trip today. You know me, I'm Das, and we are at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. Behind us here, you can see a piece of engineering that we are all fans of. We've got a Saturn V rocket, the business end of a Saturn V rocket, that we are going to be walking up and down today learning about so that we can build it in Kerbal Space Program. With me, I like to surround myself with people smarter than me. This guy's smarter than me. This is Jack, and he is a retired systems engineer from the Apollo program. Jack, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, you worked on this rocket. Is this your rocket?
Well, I worked on the Saturn 1B mainly, but
Gotcha.
It's just a smaller version of this.
Understood.
I'm pretty familiar with this rocket.
No kidding. So, you've been around rockets for a while. How did you get into working on rockets?
Well, right from college.
Right
when I was a senior in college, I was interviewed right on campus.
Right.
And I really expected to get into the aircraft industry, but instead I got into rocketry.
So you went to school for aerospace engineering,
Yes,
mechanical engineering?
Well,
or
aeronautical engineering.
aeronautical engineering. No kidding. So you wanted to do that from the time that you went to school?
Oh, long before that.
Long before that.
Yeah.
I like it. So what do we want to look at here? Like, we have this massive rocket behind
We have
us.
this massive rocket. Nobody can get any idea how big it is until they actually see it.
That's true.
Including myself. I come out here about once a week and I think, my gosh, did we really launch something this big? It is huge.
It's even with the camera, it's hard to get the context of how big
That's
this is.
right.
This is
It
a football
really
field
is.
easily.
Yes. It is the length of a football field, including the end zones.
Including end zones. So 120 yards there, right?
360 feet. Some feet.
That's one reason that we're standing so far away, because the camera's way over there right now. And these engines, we're not even directly underneath the engines. Let's walk directly underneath the engines. And you could easily be inside. I mean, I could stand up in that engine and
yes,
I wouldn't.
absolutely.
Oh, I wouldn't touch it.
They're like 17 or 18 feet in diameter.
God, you would live inside one almost.
Just about.
Maybe you need a couple of them, like one for the bathroom, one for the living room,
Yeah,
one for
well,
the...
as big as my bedroom.
It's as big as your bedroom. Wow.
Not quite, but...
So here's what we want to do, Chad, and we're going to make sure that everything's good here. Everything looks good. What we want to do is walk up the rocket and learn how we could actually build our own. Because, Jack, we play a video game called Kerbal Space Program, right? And in Kerbal Space Program, we get to sort of build our own rockets. And the cool thing about Kerbal is that it's based on real physics. So in order to build the rocket in flight, you have to learn the basics of actual aeronautical engineering, rocket science, to play the video game. It's a little bit weird. So what we're trying to do today is educate everybody at home who wants to build their own rocket, their own Saturn V in the video game, on details about it. We'll learn some history. So whatever you think is cool, whatever you want to point out to us,
Okay.
you're in charge.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, rule number one
Rule number one.
is if you're going to fly a rocket vertically, you got to produce more thrust than weight,
Okay.
than the weight that you're going to fly.
Gotcha.
This rocket produces, these 5 engines produce about 7.5 million pounds of thrust.
7.5 million pounds of thrust.
The whole rocket at liftoff weighs 6.3 million pounds, approximately.
Wow. Is that with or without the astronauts?
Oh, with everything. With everything, yeah.
The
right.
weight of the astronauts is probably inconsequential.
It's right. It is.
Yeah.
It's right. That's like, does your car's weight include the bugs on the windshield?
It's like, well, around here in Florida, there's so many bugs these days. It's like crazy the number of bugs I drove through.
Yes.
So it's a big rocket. How does this compare with modern day rockets? Like, we've got Falcon 9s and Atlases. Is this bigger, smaller?
Much bigger.
Much bigger.
This is about twice the size of a shuttle.
Tall? Weight?
Yeah, tall and weight. Well, the shuttle is about 4.5 million pounds.
Right.
At liftoff, and it was about half as tall as this.
No kidding. So what I guess I want to do here is, because we're going to get to have some people walking out, in our game, in Kerbal, whenever we build a rocket, we usually don't start at the bottom, right? I think when you build a real rocket, you probably start with the engines, and you say, I need an engine that's this big, that can lift this much, that has this much thrust, right? In our game, we don't really start at the bottom, we actually start at the top. So if you could walk and talk with me here, I'd like to walk all the way up and chat. See how long this takes us to walk at a regular pace from the back of the rocket. We're right even with the end of the engines right here, right? and we're going to walk all the way up to the front to where the astronauts rode, and we'll start walking our way back this way and learning about the different parts of the rocket that actually did the entire mission to get those 3 human beings into space. Does that sound like a good plan?
Okay.
All right. So, is this a real rocket?
Yes, this is a real rocket. It never flew.
It never flew.
Right. The reason it never flew is because Apollo 18, 19, and 20 were canceled.
Okay.
And when they were canceled, they'd already built the hardware to fly them.
Gotcha.
So we have here at Kennedy Space Center, we have one of those rocket sets.
Right.
There's one in Huntsville, Alabama, and one in Houston, Texas.
Gotcha. So this equipment, is flight hardware the right term to use?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So this isn't a replica. This isn't like a
it's not
fiberglass shell.
No. This is the real thing.
This is the real thing. And in fact, if they had kept doing the Apollo missions, this one could have flown. True or false?
True.
True. So,
however, people ask me, could you fly it today? And I would say no.
Right?
It's too old. The technology is too outdated. Some of the parts probably need replacing and they're not available anymore.
Right.
You know, it's just not feasible to fly.
This is not feasible to fly it anymore. And that's why we're building new rockets these days to take payloads into space.
Right.
But this, again, Chad, I can't say this enough. This isn't a mock-up, right? It's not a scale
model.
model.
It's not a mock-up. It's not a scale model. It's a real rocket.
Real
real thing. And real size, of course.
Yeah, it's a 1-to-1 scale model.
Yes. But it was built to fly.
It was built to fly. Is it all one rocket, or is it pieced together from a couple different?
It's a 3-stage rocket. So
okay.
Basically, it's 3 rockets, one on top of the other.
Gotcha.
1, 2, 3.
Right, and one piece sort of falls away, like the first stage falls away, and the second stage keeps going.
Yeah, when the first stage runs out of fuel, they eject it, and
right.
the second stage takes over. And when it runs out of fuel, they eject it, and then the third stage takes over.
Gotcha. All right, so can we keep going this way? All right, we're going to keep going this way all the way up to the command module.
Okay.
And the entire purpose of this rocket, it wasn't to spend money. It wasn't to look pretty. It was to put 3 human beings on the surface of the moon.
Right, and it did it not once, but 6 times.
6 times.
Right.
So that seems like a thing we might clarify, because nowadays we've got these fancy reusable rockets, right? Everybody always asks, did you reuse the Saturn V? The answer to that's no.
No, because the first 2 stages would disintegrate
right.
on re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere.
Gotcha.
The third stage, when they were through with it, it went off into deep space where you never see it again.
Right, gotcha.
And the Lunar Module, of course, both halves of it eventually ended up being left on the moon.
Gotcha.
The descent stage stayed on the moon and acted as a launch platform for the ascent stage.
For the ascent stage, gotcha.
And then when they were through the ascent stage, they ejected it and it crashed somewhere on the moon.
All right. So let's see from right here. What I wanted to do was get over to where we could see the actual command module at the very top of the rocket. Mm-hmm. So if we have the command module in the shot right now, the command module is where the astronauts would actually ride, right?
Yes.
All right, let's see if we can step back this way a little bit here. Yeah, there we go. So we can keep...
We refer to the command module as the little pointy piece on the top.
The little pointy piece on the top. Nice. Right. So let's get zoomed in on the command module there. And this is something that as we walk up and down the rocket, I want y'all to understand. This entire massive vehicle, this piece of equipment, is designed to get those 3 people in that little white pointy bit at the top to the moon.
And back.
And back. And equipment for them. They have their food with them. They have the lander in there. That's all the stuff to accomplish the moon mission. This rocket got that little bit of equipment to the moon and back with the entire rest of the rocket. So again, we've said, what is it? The rocket equation, right? Is a tyrannical equation. It takes an awful lot of rocket to get a little bit of mass somewhere.
That's right.
So
That's exactly right.
It really is. So as we sort of go up the side of the rocket here, just look at this. This entire thing is designed for the pointy bit and a couple other pieces here, the landing module, the ascent module like you were talking about. All of this is what it took to get to the moon. Now, I look at the top and I know where the command module is, right? It's got the United States flag on it, but there's another piece on top of that.
Okay, that is the launch escape system.
Okay.
That's their equivalent of a fighter pilot's injection seat.
Gotcha.
If anything, during launch or just after launch, if anything catastrophic is going to happen down here. That's NASA's term, a catastrophic event. In common terms, if it's going to explode,
Gotcha.
that's a solid rocket motor. They could fire that solid rocket motor, and it will pull that capsule away from it and throw it out over the ocean. And then they come down by parachute.
And so you can sort of see right now the service or the command module is separated from the next piece down, the service module.
Yeah, well, that's just a display thing.
Right, but if the escape tower fired, it would pull the escape capsule.
That's exactly what it would pull off.
Gotcha. So you don't pull anything you don't need.
No.
That escape capsule isn't to save the lander.
Yeah. By the way, if you're going to use that, the mission is done. You're done.
Yep.
The only thing you're interested in is getting those 3 guys back.
Back safely. You will not go to space today, I guess you could say. Gotcha. So we start at the very top of the rocket, and you all saw some shots there of the escape tower, and it's a solid rocket motor that would pull the astronauts to safely. The command module, where the astronauts sat, was right underneath that. And then what's the next stage down? There's a gray bit there.
Yeah, that's what's called the service module.
The service module, okay.
It's there to service the astronauts and stuff. It has a engine that puts it in and out of lunar orbit.
Gotcha.
It's got some thrusters around it to help maneuver it in space. Inside it has a oxygen tank, liquid oxygen tank, and liquid hydrogen tank. Those 2 chemicals are used in a fuel cell to make electricity, but the oxygen also used for breathing purposes. And it's got fuel for the rockets and the thrusters. It's got, of course, the fuel cell that makes the electricity.
Right, to run their life support system.
And it's got a water tank for their drinking water and stuff. Now, the product of the fuel cells,
right,
using liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, is water.
Is water, okay.
So it gets dumped into the water tank, so they usually produce more water than they actually use.
Would they drink that water?
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's pure distilled water.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that before. The fuel cells make water, and then they can actually use it to drink or whatever.
Yeah.
No kidding. So let's get this. You said there's some thrusters on the side of it, right?
Yeah.
The 4 little horn-looking things, I guess.
Yeah. There's a set of 4 every 90 degrees all the way around.
So it's 2 sides and then top and bottom from this perspective, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
And each one of them, you'll notice there's a nozzle pointing 4 different directions on each one. Those allow you to rotate or tilt or go sideways.
Right, sort of pitch, yaw, roll, translate.
Or even go forward and backwards very slowly.
So with those 4 different, I guess, I'm going to say mount points or placement points or something, and then nozzles in 4 directions at each of those 4 points, you get all the control, the attitude, and the translation you need.
Each nozzle, in other words, there's 16 nozzles there.
Right.
Each one of them is individually controlled.
Okay. So you can do whatever you need to with it to move the spacecraft around.
Actually, you need the computer to do that.
Right.
But
the computer would sort of balance it out?
Yeah, you'd put a command in, and the computer would determine which thrusters to fire.
Gotcha. So, Chet, that's a little bit like SAS or fine control in Kerbal Space Program, right?
Yeah.
Where you turn on SAS and it sort of tries to keep the craft stable. The SAS is Kerbal's computer that tries to use the thrusters or whatever you put aboard to help command the rocket in the stability, I guess. So, those aren't the thrusters that actually push it to the moon.
No.
Those little thrusters don't push it to the moon, y'all.
No, they control its attitude, and they can use it to do what we call mid-course corrections. Because once you fire the rocket, the Saturn IV, which is the 3rd stage,
right,
to get you going to the moon, that particular rocket firing may not have been accurate enough to get you exactly where you need to go.
Gotcha.
So there's 3 or 4 opportunities on the way to the moon to make a mid-course correction, and you can use either the main engine on the service module,
right,
or those thrusters, depending on how much change you need to make.
It's sort of like a fine change if you use the thrusters and a big change for the big engine.
It's even more critical coming back from the moon.
Right.
Because coming back from the moon, you don't go into Earth orbit.
Right.
You enter directly into the atmosphere.
Straight home.
At a very critical angle.
Right.
If it's too steep, you'll dive in and burn up.
Right.
If it's too shallow, you'll glance off the atmosphere and go off into deep space.
Not end up at home.
See them.
Wow. And so, you had to be pretty accurate there, too.
Yes, and that's why they had on the way back, they also had those 3 or 4 opportunities to make mid-course corrections.
Right, with the little fine thrusters there to make sure that
Right.
you're hitting the atmosphere at exactly the right angle. You're not skipping off. You're not diving in, and you're going to land near the aircraft carrier, the fleet, or whoever's going to be waiting for you
Now
to pick you up.
They calculate what they call a footprint, a landing footprint.
Okay.
It may be an oval. In the case of the moon landings, they were all in the South Pacific.
Gotcha.
Like east and north of New Zealand.
Okay.
In that area.
It's a big ocean out there. It's a big target
it's a
hit.
big
Yeah.
ocean. So, but they would have what they call a target area, and that target area may have been an oval, maybe 100 miles long and 50 miles wide.
Right.
And they knew it was going to land somewhere in that. So that's where they put the ships.
Because you wouldn't want to land 500 miles away from the ships.
No. In actual practice, in most cases, I believe, they were close enough, they were much more accurate than that, and they were close enough to where the people on the ships could actually see the thing coming down.
Wow. In the 60s, by the way.
Yes.
With no big supercomputers, no cell phones,
We had computers.
Had
but
computers.
We had circuit boards. We had no printed circuit boards,
Right.
no integrated circuits. They were all hand-wired circuit boards.
hand-wired circuit boards.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine hand wiring a circuit board.
In other words, they were a circuit board that had transistors and diodes and resistors and capacitors and all that stuff
Right.
mounted on them, and then wires
Like
connecting them
manually,
together.
as opposed to just making the circuit board and
Right.
then putting the components on.
Right.
No kidding. So back to the CSM here. We can't see the main engine right now.
No.
The main engine is inside the sort of fairing.
It's right in that tapered fairing, the first part of it.
Yeah.
The back part of it here has the lunar module.
Gotcha. So, chat, some things to remember here. Let's just scroll back over the rocket real quick. Up at the very top, we have the launch escape system to pull the astronauts to safety in case something happens. We've got the command module that the astronauts would actually ride in, 3 side to side, shoulder to shoulder. We've got the service module, which had their power, their fuel, thrusters, the main engine on it. And make sure you pay attention to the placement of those 4 thrusters there with the 4 little horns each.
And by the way,
Yeah.
the astronauts had no access to that service module.
They're just in the command module.
Right.
Because there's a heat shield between them
That's right.
Ah.
The heat shield's on the back side of the...
on the back side of
They
the
couldn't
command
even
module.
do an EVA and get into it.
So it's not, once you get into space, you don't get out there with a wrench and...
No.
Gotcha. All right. So, and then on the back of that, we're going to have the engine, which we can't see right now. Now, underneath that, in this big white section, you said that was where the
lunar module is.
the lunar module is. Gotcha. So we can't see the lunar module in there either. Do you know if there's one in there?
No.
Okay, there's not one in there. All right, good.
For the display purposes, they didn't put one in there.
Gotcha. Because it would be sort of weird to have a sidewards lander up there, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a model down here that shows it in there.
Gotcha.
But-
So we could look at that.
And actually, you can go there and look up in there, and you can see there's nothing in there.
Gotcha. All right. So from here, we've got an awful lot of rocket to look at. We better keep on going down the stages here. So
Okay.
the next big part that we see here, let's talk about this next part.
That's the third stage, or the Saturn 4B.
The third stage. So don't get confused about that because it's the third stage. It's the last stage that's connected to the lander.
It takes all 3 stages to get it into Earth orbit.
And this is the third one that fires.
Right.
Gotcha.
And then it's used 2 times.
Gotcha. All right. So you sort of see the balloon shape in there, right? What's the balloon shape for?
Well, that's the dome end of the fuel tank.
I appreciate that you just thought whether it was a fuel or oxidizer
Right.
tank.
I had to think because the oxidizer tank is on the top in the first stage, and the oxidizer is on the bottom in the other 2 stages.
And is that for ease of filling or something? Do you know?
No.
It's just the way it worked out?
Yeah. Well, the fuel on the bottom on the first stage is basically kerosene,
Okay.
and so you can load it days ahead of time, and it's storable.
You don't have to keep it cold.
No.
Ah.
And the others you load, and hydrogen is the lightest element we have.
Right.
That's the lightest element there is.
Top of the periodic table.
So it goes on top of the liquid oxygen.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's like a bulk. That's the top of the tank right there. That's why it's curved.
It's like a cylindrical tank with 2 spherical sections on each end.
Caps on the end or something, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Gotcha. So when you're putting together tanks in the game, be looking for stuff like that. Some of the tanks you'll actually see are sort of curved, and it's curved to help hold the fuel in the tank.
Well,
Pressure?
that's a sphere is the strongest structure from internal pressure
Right.
that you can get. A cylinder comes in second.
Comes in second.
So you use a cylinder with two spherical ends on
the end, as opposed to just having a flat end on it, which would maybe bulge out in the middle.
Right.
Gotcha. All right. So let's keep on going. What was the name of this stage again?
The Saturn 4B.
The Saturn 4B. All right. Let's see if we can go see the business end of the Saturn 4B here and check out the engines that are going to push this thing along.
Okay, the Saturn 4B only has one engine, and it's a J2 engine.
A J2.
Right. And now it's the same engine the second stage has, only the second stage has 5 J2s.
Okay. So they designed an engine, and it's the same engine here as on a little bit further down the rocket.
Now, neither one of which are reusable.
Right. You just light them once and you're done?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Except it makes a liar out of me because they used the one on the third stage twice.
Twice. All right. Let's get around here because this is a really pretty piece of engineering right here.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, fuel tanks are cool. This is amazing.
Yeah, that engine, actually, a basic rocket engine hasn't design
right.
hasn't changed since the 1930s and 40s in Germany.
No kidding. So you mean, what do you mean by that?
Okay, it's got a thrust chamber and a bell.
Right.
And a turbo pump on it that pumps fuel and oxidizer into the turbo pump.
Gotcha.
And that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
You just need some way to feed the engine. You need a place for the fuel and the oxidizer to mix, combust.
Right. Now, the only thing that's changed over the years is the materials and the propellants.
Okay.
Like when Germany was making the V2 rockets during the war, before the Second World War, they were using basically alcohol as a fuel and liquid oxygen as an oxidizer.
Alcohol, like ethanol or something?
Ethanol.
Ethanol, okay.
And that leads to a whole nother path because ethanol is a drinkable type of alcohol.
Ah.
Okay. So you can use your imagination there.
It's like a big still. You can just...
right. But now, of course, we use liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen.
Right.
Because they're more efficient.
Okay. So
also another thing I want to point out, if you'll notice on the bell, there's some bands that run this direction.
Yeah, I see them. There's the white bell.
Those are reinforcement bands.
Okay.
Now you look underneath them and you see some tubes that run this direction.
Right.
Okay, those are tubes. They're all welded together or brazed together.
Okay.
And they run fuel down one tube and back up the other tube.
Ah.
And that does two things. Number one, it cools that chamber so that the metal don't melt.
Yep.
And it preheats the fuel so it makes it more efficient to burn.
Gotcha. So if you step this way, let me make sure I got you right here. Those are the tubes that you're talking about. You can see the vertical, I guess, or the...
That's right.
Yeah.
This way, as opposed to ones this way are reinforcing bands.
Reinforcing
to reinforce
bands.
that assembly.
Ah, and so they run the fuel down one of the internal things, then back up the other end.
Every other one is a down tube. Every other one is an up tube.
Is an up tube, and they do that to heat the fuel up, basically.
And to cool the engine.
And to cool the engine.
So that the engine
trade.
don't melt.
Ah, that makes sense. Is that? Do they actually care about the fuel being heated up? Does that help? They do.
It makes it more efficient to burn.
So it's like a double-edged, it's a twofer, I guess.
Twofer, yeah.
You cool the engine to keep it from melting down, and then you raise the temperature of the fuel so it burns more efficiently. What are all the other pieces, like the ball shape, the spheres?
The spheres are helium tanks.
Okay.
They use the helium for two purposes, and this applies from top to bottom.
Okay.
Helium is used basically for two reasons. One is to purge the engines of any foreign materials before they ignite them, so that you don't get a rough combustion.
Right.
And then the second reason is they use the helium to pressurize the fuel and oxidizer tanks so that the turbo pumps will see a positive head pressure. Now that's important so that they don't cavitate or suck air.
Gotcha. Start making bubbles where they shouldn't be making bubbles.
Right.
Gotcha.
And the reason they have to use helium is twofold. Number one, helium's totally inert chemically. It doesn't chemically react.
It's not going to react with
anything,
anything.
Right. And the second most important part is it's got a boiling point that's colder than the boiling point of liquid hydrogen.
Okay.
To pressurize the tanks, the hydrogen tank, you need a element that stays in the gaseous state below the temperature of the boiling liquid hydrogen.
I gotcha, for the fuel.
Yeah.
All right.
Hydrogen boils at about 420 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Helium boils at about 450 degrees below zero
Right.
Fahrenheit. So that's why they almost have to use helium.
They almost have to use helium. You'd have to have something in there that fits in the slot.
And I know of no other element that boils any colder than that.
Gotcha. No kidding. So we've got this engine. You said this stage was used twice.
Yes.
This one, what were the two, I guess, burns it did?
Okay, well, it was used, the first burn was put it into final Earth orbit.
Right.
It boosted it up to 120 miles at 17,500 miles.
So to actually keep it from falling back into the atmosphere.
Yeah, now what keeps things in orbit is gravity and forward speed.
Yes.
In other words, the gravity is continually pulling you down toward Earth.
Right.
But you're going so fast that you're missing the Earth.
You miss it. I love it. That's what we say.
Yeah.
You're going around the Earth so quickly that you fall, but you miss.
But you're missing the Earth, and that's what keeps you in orbit.
Gotcha. So this engine here, the first thing that it did was make sure that the astronauts, their CSM, their lander, stayed in orbit. Got
Yes.
enough sideways velocity, enough horizontal velocity to actually fall around the Earth.
Yeah.
I love falling around the
Right.
Earth and missing.
And you can, discounting the atmosphere.
Right.
If you had no atmosphere, and you could get a forward speed up, you could have an orbit that's this high off the ground.
Off the ground.
Yeah, if you get enough forward speed and don't have an atmosphere.
And don't have an atmosphere. And nobody's in the way, and there's no mountain.
Right.
I mean, we're in Florida. There's no real mountains in Florida.
No,
so
but you got to go around the whole Earth.
the rest of the Earth.
Yeah.
Best
So
to stay over the sea if you can.
But you got to get in the case of the Earth, you got to give above the atmosphere, or
Right.
it'll slow you down.
It slows you down too much, then you end up coming home
Yeah.
when you really want to go to the moon.
Yeah. So we're kind of doing this backwards from the way I'm used to talking from the bottom.
Start from
up.
that end up, yeah.
The first stage gets you to about 38 miles altitude at 5,000 miles an hour.
Right?
The second stage gets you to about 110 miles at about 14,000 miles an hour.
Okay.
Then the third stage, first burn, gets you to 17,500 miles an hour at about 120 miles altitude.
Gotcha.
That's in Earth orbit.
And there's where they get to Earth orbit, they do some checks, they make sure everything's cool.
Right. It's like climbing stairs. You go 3 or 4 flights and then you stop and say, "Is my heart still all right? Is that, you know?"
Am I
then
clear
you
to
go on.
proceed?
Yeah, you're clear to proceed, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what they do. And then they light that engine a second time to boost it to 25,000 miles an hour, which is the escape velocity to go to the moon.
To go towards the moon, to set your trajectory up so that you end up going to the moon instead of just hanging around the Earth.
Right.
Gotcha. So we've got the third stage here, and again, we're building it from the top down, right? So we started at the top and we're going this way, and then when we get to the end, we can summarize the 3 stages again. But this engine here will get you into orbit after it's got the help from the other stages, and it'll get you on the way out to the moon as well.
Yes.
All right, so let's keep on going to the next stages here. And again, I'll bring the camera around right quick, because look at this massive tank.
And the same thing applies. So what you're looking at here is the end of the fuel tank.
Right?
And it's a spherical section. This may not be totally spherical, but it's on the end of a cylinder.
Yep,
the
yep.
other end is also a sphere.
Gotcha.
basically.
It's like it's
Spherical
balancing out
section.
the volume that you have inside the rocket to store the fuel and the strength of it. So it's not a complete sphere, because then you'd lose some of your volume, right?
Yeah, right.
But it still has the shape so that it has the strength so it can
Yes.
contain the fuel in it. Now, those big hoses over there.
Okay, those are used to fill and vent
Okay.
from the ground. That's where the ground when the fuel
like the
and
umbilicals and stuff like that, I
umbilicals
guess,
are
right?
connected there. We got to pump the fuel and the oxidizer and the hydrogen on board.
Yep.
And we also have to provide a vent for those tanks.
Okay. Because they start to warm up.
They are warmed up, and when you start putting the cryogenics in, they cool down. But they're continually boiling off, so you got to vent that boil off.
Gotcha. And we see that when we watch real rocket launches, y'all. A lot of times you'll see people call it smoke coming off the side of the rocket.
But
it's not smoke.
It's vapor it's liquid. It's gaseous oxygen and gaseous helium.
Gotcha.
Hydrogen.
Yeah, sort of boiling off
Yeah.
because the fuel, the oxidizer is cold. It's not cold outside in Florida, and you have to relieve that pressure somehow.
Right.
Gotcha. So look for that as well, y'all. Look for those big, the big hoses, because on the tanks that we have in Kerbal Space Program, you'll actually see some little visual enhancements on the models that show hoses like that. Now, they don't have to do anything in the game, but it's really cool that they've added those in to the part models in the game. Let's keep on walking. We got more engines to look at, I think. And I'm going to do this as well, y'all. John, are you doing good? All right, cool. I just want to make sure that John is doing good as well. So, chat, I know I'm not reading a lot of chat right quick. We are moving up to the end of the rocket. Again, we've got Jack here with us. Jack seems to know everything about this rocket. I appreciate you again, Jack.
The Saturn V rocket.
Well, let's go up to the business end of the second stage. This is the second stage, right?
Right.
All right.
It's called a Saturn II.
A Saturn II.
Right.
All right. And we'll get somewhere over here where we can see all these engines. Let's actually stand this way so we don't have to point up as much. Because here you said these engines behind us are the same engines as that one.
Each engine is a J2 engine.
Okay.
That's the model number of the engine.
J2.
They use 5 of them here and 1 of them up there.
God. Is there any? Do you know if there's any big difference between these and that one, or?
I don't know of any big difference. No, there's 5 of them together.
Gotcha.
Oh, there is a difference.
Okay.
Well, there's not. That engine is gimbalable.
Gimbal means it can thrust vector.
We can move it thrust vector control. Yep. On this one, there's 5 engines. The center one is not gimbalable.
So it doesn't.
The outer 4 are.
Ah. I gotcha. If you had the one in the middle moving, so everybody knows if you've played the game, right, and you have a rocket on the pad and you press ASDW, you'll actually see the engines wiggle back and forth a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's gimbaling or thrust vectoring. What you do is you change exactly how you're applying the thrust force to the rocket.
Yeah, and that movement you see before launch is really a test.
It's a test.
To make sure they're working right before you release it. I mean, it only lasts maybe a half a second.
Just to make sure they're free, they're able to move, they're not jammed up or something.
Right.
Because that's critical for actually steering the rocket while it's flying.
That's right.
They use that thrust vector.
It's kind of like everybody, I'm sure, when they were a kid, took a broomstick and tried to balance it.
Yeah, you're right, yep.
And that's exactly what you're doing here. Only you're moving it with the rocket engines.
With the rocket engines by pointing the engines a little bit differently to balance the rest of the stick on top of it.
That's right.
I like it. Now, I know that there's another way that this stage actually had a little bit of control, right? Are these the bumps on the side, the propulsion modules?
No, those are, they're feeding the fuel around the oxygen tank to the engines.
So those are like
pipes.
Not raceways, those are just pipes. Right. Is this the stage that has the propulsion modules on it, or where is that at?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay,
I don't know that we have propulsion modules.
Gotcha, okay.
We have some propulsive vents.
Vents?
That are used after staging to vent the tanks to kind of move it away from the rest of it before they light the next stage in.
So that just sort of like pushes them apart or something?
Yeah.
And they would just vent fuel out of those?
They just vent the tanks, the pressure that's in the tanks.
So no, it's not like an engine that fires up and there's fire coming out.
It's like, you got a balloon that's pressurized with air, you turn loose of it, it goes.
Gotcha. Okay,
you do that with this, you open those vent valves and they'll push the...
It just gives you a little bit of impulse.
A little bit of motion away.
And they drift apart really slowly.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it decreases the chance of any recontact or collision with the pieces you're getting rid of.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't want to have them right up against each other and then light your engine and have something accidentally contact.
Come back.
It's like a safety clearance thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's this stage. We have one more massive stage on it. All this yellow stuff right here, is that part of the rocket?
Anything that's painted yellow is ground support equipment.
Is ground support equipment.
That's what you hook the crane to when you're moving it around and moving it to vertical. And right now, its total function is to hold this end of that rocket up.
Okay. So the rocket isn't, like here, this is on the cradle, I guess. It's connected to the tank.
Right, but you see it's got some yellow on both ends of each stage.
So, chat, look, pay attention to that and look at all the different parts that are yellow there. Anything that's yellow...
Anything that's yellow don't fly.
It doesn't fly. It's ground service equipment.
In this case, it's mostly lifting devices or lifting accessories to attach a crane.
Like
to.
crane mount points or something,
Yeah,
because
right.
you don't put like a big strap around the
No.
tank and you'll crumple the tank,
No,
right?
that's right.
You have to have a rigid structure to actually pick it up.
Right. So in this case, what happens when the first stage? Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of you, but
That's
when,
okay.
when the first stage goes vertical and gets set on the launch platform,
Right?
then you don't disconnect the crane from there. You disconnect that from the stage, and then the crane takes that yellow part away.
Away, I gotcha. All right, and then the rocket's sort of sitting there. So I guess that's a good thing to talk about real quick. We're talking about the ground service equipment. They didn't just weld all this rocket together horizontally.
No,
They actually integrated it
they
vertically.
stacked it. What we call stacking it in the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building, which
Right.
is the big building.
Yep,
And the first stage, which by the way is a Saturn 1C.
1C. So wait, it's a 1C. It's
Then a Saturn 2,
Saturn 2,
Saturn 4B make up the Saturn rocket.
the Saturn 5.
Don't ask me what happened to Saturn 3. I don't know.
Why didn't they just go 1, 2, 3? I mean,
Well, I think actually they did. The Saturn 3 was probably a failed design of the Saturn 4. Or
gotcha.
something happened and they didn't use it.
At least they didn't come up with acronyms for each stage. Then we have to remember what every acronym means. So
But all together, it makes a Saturn 5.
it's a Saturn 5. Gotcha. Let's keep on walking down to the end because we want to get to the business end down here. And I think
Okay.
we can walk this way, I think.
Yeah, we can
Probably
go
the best
this
way.
way.
Chat, how y'all doing? I know that there might be a little bit of scratching every now and then. We'll try to figure out what that is for the next guest. But I appreciate y'all hanging in there with us. Again, we will see if we can get some time at the end to ask some questions. But let's keep on walking down because we want to get to the engines. It's a big rocket. It takes a long time
and
to
this
cover.
is just a model of that with cutaways here.
Gotcha. Oh, you can actually see the fuel tanks inside.
Yeah.
All right. We'll navigate here briefly, chat. There we go. And people in chat are saying it's fantastic. Thank Jack for everybody that's watching right now. So we appreciate you. We're going to say that again, but we really do appreciate your time here today.
Well, thank you. I enjoy doing it.
All right, let's
Or
keep.
I wouldn't be doing it.
Or I wouldn't be doing it, right?
That's right.
He doesn't have to show up. He's retired,
That's right. I'm retired. I don't even get paid for this.
We'll see if we get you a mission patch or something.
Right.
That's all I can do. Like, let's keep on walking down to
I
the
do
end.
get a few perks.
A few perks?
Yeah.
Got like a parking spot?
Yeah, I don't have to pay for parking, you know. And let's see, what else is it? Oh, I get some free tickets to hand out to people.
Oh, that's cool.
friends.
Yeah.
And I get annual pass.
Annual pass. Nice. Let's see. Maybe over this way it might be good for us to stand over here because these engines are hard to get on the camera.
Yeah, they are. And right now, here's a command and service module
Right.
put together. You get close-ups of it.
Yeah.
And you can really see those thrusters
Oh, wow. You're right.
right there. And there's, one down, there's one every 90 degrees.
Yep, 4 of them around the outside of it.
Yeah.
We'll finish up with this because, again, we're going to look at these F1 engines on the back of the rocket.
Yes.
And then this entire rocket's job is to get this and the lander to the moon. So
And back.
And back. And I like that you keep saying that. And back,
Yeah,
like he's
that's
correcting
right.
me.
That's right. Well, that's what Kennedy's challenge was in 61?
Right?
Said we're going to build a rocket by the end of this decade to get men to the moon and safely return them
And
to
safely return them to Earth.
Earth. Right. And that's exactly what we did.
A few times.
A few times.
A
We
few
did that
times.
6 times.
Yeah. And we went to the moon a couple more times, or one more time than that, I think. We didn't land on the moon, but we went around,
Well,
right?
yeah, there was 2 of them that went around the moon.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's Apollo 13, and
Right.
that's a whole nother story. It was supposed to land, but because they actually didn't,
Yep. But it still did the mission. It
still
returned
did
the
the
astronauts
mission, right.
safely back to the Earth.
that's right.
So-
And if it had landed, that would have been 7. But
Right.
it didn't, so there's 6 landings.
God. So let's swing around this way right here because there's a fantastic shot of the side of these engines. And again, it's really hard to get the scale of these things.
It
You could
is. It
easily
really
standing them and not touch the
I
top.
wish we had a forklift or a lift aloft that would bring one of us up and put us inside.
So we
one of
could
those.
stand next to it.
Right, or even step off and stand on the belt. I've seen the pictures of them doing that.
Like back when they were building them?
Yeah.
Wow. So, chat, I will say it's so hard to get the scale of these engines, right? It's like I think it's probably bigger than my Toyota Camry. I don't know. It's a big engine.
Yeah.
There is one of them in the Rocket Garden, I believe, that you can stand next to.
Yes,
I don't know.
There is.
Yeah, I don't know that that's flight hardware, but it just gives you a sense of scale.
If it's not flight, it may be flight hardware, but
Right.
I don't know for sure.
Gotcha.
But at least the scale will give you the scale. It's a life size.
It's almost like 2 stories tall.
Yeah.
It's just hard. It's hard to convey to y'all
Yeah.
how big this rocket and these engines are.
I'm not 100%. I think that we're talking about the diameter of the exit cone.
Right.
Is at the exit plane is like 17 feet.
Wow. It's just without somebody standing up there, have some context of how big it is. It's almost impossible to show.
Well,
so these
look,
engines,
the whole diameter of the first stage is 33 feet.
33 feet.
So you get some context. It may not be 17 feet. Maybe it's like 12 or 14 feet.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember for sure.
Yeah, fair
what
enough.
the diameter is.
It's you've probably forgotten more about this rocket than I'll never know. So, like the diameter at the bottom, y'all, is almost 3 stories tall. You get about 10 feet per story, so it's like a 3-story building with a rocket laying over. I mean, this building that we're in is probably 5 stories, 6 stories tall.
Yeah, because you probably got 1 story below the rocket,
Yep.
and then 3 stories of the rocket, and 1 story.
1
above.
story above it. God, it's a purpose-built building.
Yes.
This building wasn't just sitting around and they slammed the rocket
No,
into
as a
it.
matter of fact, they put the rocket here and built a building around it.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Well, sort of.
Sort of.
I think they built a couple of walls first, and then they put the rocket here, built the other 2 walls, and put the ceiling on.
Gotcha. So these engines, I think I said these are F1 engines, right?
F1s.
F1 engines.
That's just a model number. I
just
don't
what they
know
call
what
it.
it means or whatever.
It's not like F standard for fantastic or anything like that. It's
I
just,
don't know.
yeah. This is just a made-up name, Chad. Just like we do in Carl, we just make up the names. I think in Making History, these are
The
mastodons.
guy
so-
who had the concepts name could have been Frank. I don't know. So it's an F1.
He just labeled the engineering diagram F1 and it
Yeah.
stuck. He never
Yeah.
told anybody F was
Yeah.
for Frank.
And the J2s were the second designed by Julius.
Julius.
Something, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
But they're both built by Rocketdyne.
Rocketdyne, okay. And Rocketdyne still builds engines. I
Oh
believe.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Jet engines and rocket engines.
Wow. So let's walk through the whole thing right quick. You're giving us some statistics of the launch, right? And we've got 5 of the F1s down here. These are the first things that would light.
Right, and they produce 7.5 million pounds of thrust.
7.5 million pounds of thrust. Yeah, we'll scoot this way and see if we get some engines behind
And for
us.
a total weight that at liftoff, the whole vehicle, which by the way is 360 some feet tall,
Right?
which is the length of an American football field, including the end zone.
Including the end zones.
And NEI produces 7.5 million pounds of thrust and weighs about 6.3 million pounds, fully loaded and ready to fly.
And it has to produce more thrust than it weighs,
Or it wouldn't lift off.
so it can take off. I think it's I don't know if it's the engineering term, but we call it the thrust to weight ratio.
That's right.
The
It is
ratio
an
of
engineering term, and it's a thrust to weight ratio.
Cool. So if you're building a rocket in Kerbal and you're trying to get it to take off the launch pad, you light the engines and it doesn't go anywhere, it's probably because your thrust to weight
Thrust
ratio
to weight ratio is less than 1.
less than 1. If it's
Right.
greater than 1, you have more thrust than weight.
It'll lift off.
Take off. If it's less than 1, you have less thrust than weight and you fall down.
It just stays sits there.
Yeah, you don't want to fall down. Wow. So, in terms of the thing taking off, right? It lights all the F1s, all 5 of them, and that's the massive rumble, the smoke that comes out the side, and it starts to take off, right? And this was the 7 million pounds, 7 point something million pounds.
Right.
Would it run for 10 minutes? Would it run for 2 minutes?
About 3 or 4 minutes.
About 3 or 4 minutes. So it may take them 10 or 15 minutes to get into orbit, 20 minutes, I don't know.
Right.
But this massive tank and massive engines only runs for a couple minutes.
Right. To get some perspective of what that is, it's burning 2 average backyard swimming pools full of fuel and oxidizer every second.
Every second. 2 swimming pools full of fuel and oxidizer per second. And it's just using Newton. It's blowing them up and throwing them out the back, and then Newton says that's going to push the rocket forward.
That's right.
2 swimming pools per second. Does the rate change while it flies, or it's just as long as those engines are running?
No, it's pretty constant.
It's pretty
until
constant.
It runs out of fuel.
It's not like these engines, they start off at half throttled and they increase the throttle.
There is no throttle.
There's no throttle.
They're on or off.
Wow.
That's all there is.
I didn't know that either. So that's another thing. In the game, you can actually throttle the engines, and you might get these big, massive engines, and you can put them at 1% throttle. These engines, they don't run at 1% throttle.
No. Now, the only throttleable liquid engines that I know of were on the shuttle.
Were on the shuttle.
shuttle main engines. And they were only throttleable from 100% down to 70%.
They'd have like a range where they could be throttled. And then we probably have some fancy new engines that companies are flying these days, but these engines are on or off.
The reason they made those throttleable is to get through what we call max Q.
Right.
That's the maximum dynamic pressure due to forward speed and atmospheric pressure.
Yep, the atmospheric density, the speed of the rocket.
And right at max Q is when the Challenger blew up. And or right after max Q.
Right.
And they throttle those engines back to 70%.
Okay.
Until they get through max Q, and then throttle them up to 103 or 104%.
So by throttling them back, you sort of reduce the stress on the rocket.
Right. You reduce the stress of the rocket until you get through the max Q.
Right, and then you can pedal to the metal again.
Pedal to the metal.
I don't know if that's the right term. There's not like a pedal at the top of the rocket that the astronaut would step on.
No, but everybody understands the term.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I mean, the astronauts didn't particularly fly the rocket.
Not really.
They didn't have like a joystick.
The computer
right.
did.
It was the computer doing everything.
Doing everything. Now, having said that, either the astronauts or ground control could override anything the computer was doing.
Gotcha.
If they thought it was doing it wrong. Prime example when that happened is when Armstrong took over the flying of the LEM across the moon.
Right.
Because he saw it was going to land in
a boulder field.
And he knew if it landed there, they would never take off again.
Right.
So he took over the control of flying it and flew it across the moonscape until they found a place.
He sort of hovered over the danger area
and then just flew forward like an airplane flying forward.
With like almost nothing but
like
the smell of gas left.
Really more like a helicopter flying across until they found a relatively boulder-free
area to set it down in.
Because early on the landing, if you may not remember this detail, but he said, we've overshot our target landing by about 3 minutes or something like
right.
that. 3 minutes in that thing is a long way.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fuel, too, I guess.
They were getting computer faults that they had never seen before.
Right.
So that kept them up there, and they just overflew their original landing site.
Well, they made sure everything was okay. They didn't need to abort the landing and get safely back to orbit.
They came very close to aborting it,
yeah,
but they didn't.
I think I remember, I don't remember what the fault was or something. It's like a 1202 alarm or something.
Yeah.
And they said, what do we do? If it doesn't recur, just keep on going.
Some guy down on ground said, I know what that is, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
And they took his word for it, and they didn't worry about it.
From here to the moon. Right?
Yeah.
It's not like we're talking next to each other. It's somebody here who knows that system forward and backwards, and what happened during the landing on the moon was relayed back to him, and he said, I got it.
Well, see, they were seeing faults that they'd never seen in any of the simulations.
Yep.
So they didn't know what it was, except this guy who had seen it during the software development.
Right.
It was just the computer was overloaded.
Yep.
That's all it was.
Hug a programmer, chat.
Right.
Hug a programmer.
Yeah. And it was, and they made it. Those are the guys I call gutsy.
Right? The steely-eyed missile man? Or?
Yeah, they were the gutsy guys.
Gosh. It's just, we love the rockets, right? And we love to see the launch. And something that I always tell people is, remember, it's not just the launch day, and it's not just the astronauts that are riding on the rocket. It's the hundreds, the thousands of people that built the rocket, tested the rocket, programmed the rocket, stacked the rocket.
Another thing, all these mission patches that you see hanging up here, there's a mission patch for each flight. And the one thing you'll notice is there are 2 patches that have no astronauts' names on them.
Okay.
One of them is Apollo 13. I have no idea why the astronauts' names are not on that. It had nothing to do with the accident because they're made long before the flight.
Huh.
The other one is Apollo 11, the first moon landing.
They didn't put the names on it.
And there was no names on it because that was Neil Armstrong's desire not to have names on it, because he said this is going to be the first moon landing, and we're landing on the moon for all mankind. So if everybody's name can't be on it, none of them will be.
Wow. It'd be a really big patch if you put everybody's name on it.
Right.
Right? It'd be too many names.
Well, that's why he said that everybody's name can't be on it.
Yeah. Gosh.
So anyhow, he was very adamant of that. And that's just the way those guys thought.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They weren't doing it for themselves.
They were doing it
in
for...
my mind, they're the biggest heroes we've ever had. But they didn't feel that.
Yeah. It's hard for me to imagine something we could do nowadays that could match this, right? With all our computers and our simulations and our testings and all this stuff that we have, it's hard to imagine.
You got to remember that these guys were doing it for the first time.
Yeah. God, it's just the level of trust that you would have to have in every engineer that worked on this project, that you would put yourself on top of 360 feet worth of fuel, light it on fire, and shoot yourself at a rock that's orbiting the Earth.
And they, at the same time, they had a sense of humor.
Yep.
If one of them said,
We'll step around this way a little bit.
One of them said, we're sitting on top of a couple of million parts that all have to work together.
Right.
And every one of them made by the lowest
Made
bidder.
by the lowest bidder.
That wasn't quite true, because there's other things to consider.
Yeah.
But
It's a good joke.
The message across.
Yeah, it's a good sort of thing
It's a
to
good
chuckle
message.
about. It's like the pencils in space thing. Like, oh, the NASA developed $1 million spaceman. Like, it's an urban legend because that's not exactly true. And then Russia just used a pencil. Like, well, there's a reason you don't use a pencil, as it turns out. You don't want graphite in your electrical components when you're floating around in microgravity.
That's right.
So little stories like that are definitely cool.
And the other one was the three astronauts sitting out on the pad. And I actually heard him say this. He says, we're sitting out here on the pad on top of this thing. There's nobody else within 3.5 miles of it.
Right.
And we're the reason why.
We're the reason why. Everybody else got out of Dodge. They're like, I'm not going to be around this rocket. Y'all sit on top of it so we can light it. Like,
Yeah.
no kidding.
All
So,
right. Well,
I think we've got a pretty good amount of information for you so far. Do you mind if we ask a couple questions real quick?
no. I
Chat.
don't mind.
So now's your chance. We want to be respectful of Jack's time here, but if you have a question, you might have noticed I haven't been reading questions in real time. This is your chance to ask a question to an actual retired systems engineer who worked on these missions, on these rockets, right? So this is your chance. I got it right here on my phone. It'll take just a second to go through. Actually, there are already people asking questions. They've probably been asking questions the entire time, and I've just been ignoring them because we're busy. Do we know where the flight computers were on the rocket? Is it just one computer up with the astronauts?
Oh,
or?
no.
Okay.
No. The flight computers, there's one stage we skipped.
Okay.
And that's the instrumentation unit.
We did. It was on the ground over there.
Well, it's not there
It used to
anymore.
be there.
It used to be. It's just a 3-foot section built by IBM.
Right.
It has all of the computers and everything, and all of the electronics and the gyros and stuff like that in it.
Right.
To control everything from where it is on top of the third stage down to the bottom.
Because once you separate the rocket, if you separate your computer, it can't keep. Gotcha.
So the command module and the lunar module both had its own computers.
Right, because it had to, this piece right here had to make it to the moon.
Now, I'm not saying those computers never communicated with each other, because they did.
Right.
But they had to be separate because of the separation.
Right, because you would ditch one computer at some point and it couldn't keep helping you out.
Right.
So,
right.
Gotcha.
And of course, there was more computers than that because there were backup computers.
Right, right. So you sort of had to plan out the processing power you needed and put it in the right place, so you had it for as long as you needed to it. But once you didn't need it anymore, you could drop it and not carry the weight with you.
Right.
All right. That's a good question. There's multiple different locations. And again, Chad, once we cut Jack loose here, we'll walk back up and down the rocket again, and we'll zoom in on some different things and stuff like that. I think we've walked you around the facility enough today. So.
Well, I enjoyed doing that.
Oh, we appreciate you. Let's see, there's more questions here. Question, could you ask Jack, what in particular did you work on? Like, you worked on the Saturn, a different Saturn, I think.
I worked on the Saturn 1B.
The Saturn 1B.
Well, Saturn 1 and Saturn 1B, which is a smaller version
Okay.
of the Saturn 5.
And what specifically did you do on the Saturn 1, Saturn 1B?
Okay, the Saturn 1 was used for testing the Apollo spacecraft in Earth orbit.
In Earth orbit.
It was big enough to put it or a lunar module in Earth orbit,
Right.
but it wasn't big enough to put them both in Earth orbit
At the same time.
at the same time.
So you could do like a systems test. You could carry this up to Earth orbit, and you could check everything out. It's like a shakedown.
Yeah, because NASA likes to do things one step at a time. Like I pointed out before, you stop and rest, see if everything's still all right, and then you go on to the next step. So the first step was to take the lunar module. Oh no, that wasn't the first one, but take a command and service module, put men on it, put it in Earth orbit, and do a bunch of testing in Earth orbit, and then come back.
So you learn about it, you correct errors.
That was done on the Saturn 1B.
Okay.
Okay. And then didn't have any men on it, but we launched a prototype of the lunar module into Earth orbit. Did some testing by remote control.
Right, just to make sure that once it got to space.
And then, of course, it burned up in the atmosphere eventually.
Right.
And then later on, after we launched Skylab, if you remember, that was our first space station.
Yep.
We launched Skylab on the Saturn V. Then we launched 3 crews to the Skylab on the Saturn 1B.
Right.
And then we launched this crew for Apollo-Soyuz on the Saturn 1B.
So you got sort of the big rocket to lift the heavy equipment, and then you have a smaller rocket to lift the humans that don't need to make it all the way to the moon. They just need to make it to orbit.
Right. So that was the first stage. The first step for NASA was, let's test this thing in Earth orbit before we go to the moon.
Yeah.
And then the second stage was, well, let's just go fly around the moon and come back.
Right.
Third stage was, let's fly to the moon, go in orbit, and then come back.
Right.
Then the next stage was go in orbit, get in the lunar module, go down part way, and then come back to Earth.
Come back up again, but not land that time.
Not land that time. Now,
like
the
a dry
next
run.
one was a full moon landing.
Yep.
That would be an Apollo 11.
So you could do the same sort of thing. Like if you're super hardcore, like replicating this in Kerbal Space Program, you could do all the different steps. It's not just slap together one rocket and send it to the moon the first time.
Right.
You could do it like NASA and build the Saturn 1, the Saturn 1B, and then build just sort of an iterative design.
Yeah, even within the same mission, I'll call it.
Right.
Like Apollo 11.
Right.
Taken. First you went into Earth orbit.
Right.
And you stayed in Earth orbit, checking out, maybe at 1 orbit, 2 orbits, whatever it took to make sure everything's still okay.
Yep.
Then off you go to the moon.
Gotcha.
And you go in orbit around the moon. And then you stay in orbit around the moon until is everything still okay? Okay, you're clear to do a lunar lander.
Yep.
And then you do that.
Then once you just step along.
You step one step at a time. Add a go a step further each time.
Yep. And again, it's about that, the important part of getting to the moon. It's not just getting to the moon, it's getting home safely as well. So you don't want to jump ahead of yourself and get yourself in a situation where you can't get home.
That's right.
Absolutely.
There's enough risk of that already.
Right, absolutely.
Like if Armstrong hadn't taken over the flying of the lunar module across, they would not have come home.
Right. God. Let's keep looking at some questions here in chat. There's probably like 1,000 questions. I know that we never get to all the questions. Huh? Do you want a question? Of course you can ask a question.
What was your day-to-day work like? I know you talk a lot about the broad scope of what you guys accomplished, but day-to-day, what were things you look forward to?
What did you work on? So, chat, the question was, what did Jack work on specifically, like day-to-day? Like turning bolts, designing things?
Most of the time, I was a system engineer on the first stage engines and hydraulic system.
Okay.
Now, what that meant, we did a lot of testing of the engines before launch, and we did integrating testing and all that.
Right.
And we had to write all of those test procedures. And when we ran into a problem, we had to write paper to do the troubleshooting.
Right.
Participate in the paper to do the troubleshooting. And then, of course, once you find out what the problem is, you got to write paper to fix it.
There's a lot of paper, huh?
Oh, yeah, a lot of paper. Somebody once said, well, when the weight of the paperwork is greater than the weight of the rocket, it's ready to fly.
we'll get humans to the moon just by stacking up paperwork, and they can just climb up the side of it.
That's right. And that's basically what we did. We climbed to the moon on the paper.
Yeah, I've heard the same sort of joke about dollar bills. Like, if you give me enough dollar bills, I can get you to the moon just by stacking them up.
Right.
So it doesn't actually work that way. Like,
no. But yeah, it was a lot of boring work.
Okay.
A lot of
detailed.
A lot of time. I'm being truthful here. It was a job.
Right.
A lot of times I think to myself, why am I still here? What am I doing this for?
Right.
Now, why don't I go out and get a real job? And, you know, and then we'd launch, and I'd say, oh yeah, that's why.
Okay, there you go. It's all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's I helped with that.
Yeah, that was the rewarding part.
Yeah.
It was very rewarding when we successfully launched something.
That's fantastic. It's still really rewarding, even when we don't work on it. Like, there's a lot of space fans nowadays who sort of see these rockets launch, and it's all this work to get to that one point in time where you launch the rocket.
And that's one reason I do this.
Yep.
Is because I figure this is my contribution to promoting the space program, which I think is extremely important.
Absolutely. We appreciate you doing it. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Let's get some more questions here. We got that. Favorite missions and stuff. Yeah, there's all sorts of questions. We got the systems that you worked on. How do the astronauts board the rocket on the top? I think we walked past that.
Okay.
Can we see it? Can you get it, John? The red tower down there.
Yeah, it had a tower either at the pad for the shuttle,
right,
or on the mobile launch platform for the Apollo.
Right.
And it had elevators in it that took it up, and then it had what we call swing arms,
right,
to connect the umbilicals all the way up. And it had a swing arm at the top that had a white room on the end of it that the astronauts would walk across that and get into the capsule from that swing arm.
Gotcha.
What we call the swing arm.
The swing arm.
Once they were in, that swing arm was swung back. That's why it's called a swing.
That's why, because
it's
swung
back.
Swang
back against the tower.
Right.
And of course, then the umbilicals down the rest of them at T0, they all separated.
Separate and get out of the way.
Swing back out of the way.
Yeah. This way, where you want us. All right. Cool. And again, y'all, it's an active facility. There are all sorts of people here enjoying the visitor complex right now. We don't ask to shut this down while we do the field trips or anything. So all the people that you see walking around, they're guests that have come here to check out the rocket and enjoy what's going on, sort of learn about stuff. But no problems with people being behind us in the shot and stuff like that.
As a matter of fact, Kennedy Space Center itself is an active spaceport.
Right.
And has always been.
Right.
We didn't shut down the Space Center just because we shut down the shuttle program.
Ah.
It continued to operate and launching unmanned rockets.
Right. Gotcha. So another question here, and I don't know if this is like a complexity thing. Nowadays we see some rockets that have rockets strapped to the side of the rockets.
Yes.
Right? Why didn't we do that with this? We just have one massive tank.
It wasn't necessary, I guess. They made it big enough. What those strap-ons are solid rocket boosters.
Right. So you see, on an Atlas V has some variants that have strap-on boosters.
Have, depending on the weight of the payload, it could have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 strap-ons on it, or however many it took. That there again, it depends on the weight of the payload.
Yeah. So for here, did we not have the technology to separate them, or we just didn't need to? We just built a huge.
It's how am I going to word this? It's most of the scientists did not believe in solid rockets.
Okay. Back when we first started doing this.
Right. They were liquid propellant rockets.
That's a firework. I'm not going to put people on top of a firework.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the problems they had with a solid rocket. Once you start it, you can't turn it off.
You can't turn it off.
That's not true for a liquid propellant.
Right.
All you have to do is close the valves and it'll shut down.
That's exactly the same thing in the game. If you have an SRB on the rocket, once you light it, it goes until it's empty.
You can't shut it off.
You go. With these, you can actually shut them off because you turn off their fuel. They get starved. They don't have anything to blow up and throw out the back, and you get no more thrust.
That's right.
Gotcha. So it's just it might have been a trust thing.
It was what do you call it? When you live in a certain, it's the environment.
It's what you had experience with. It was what you wanted to use.
That's right. That's what you wanted to use.
Yeah, it's sort of where you were.
I'm not even sure that solid rockets were considered.
Right.
Now the only solid rocket on this is that escape rocket
on the very top.
top.
Right. And that one, if you're trying to get the astronauts away safely,
out of there right now.
You don't need it to turn off.
No.
You want them out of there
you want
ASAP.
them right now.
Gotcha.
And a solid rocket. One of the advantages of a solid rocket is it's very quick to ignite.
Right. It doesn't have to spool up to increase
you
its
push
thrust.
a button and you're gone.
You're out of there.
Right.
And you want the astronauts out of there. If something goes wrong with any of the rest of this complex machine, you need those astronauts out of there ASAP to get clear and get safe. again, the mission is to get to the moon and back safely, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, to demonstrate, I don't know if we would take time to explain this. But
You can explain anything.
okay, on the shuttle,
Right.
you know, you had 2 solid rocket boosters on the side,
Right?
which are a piece of ordnance. And you had 8 hold-down posts.
Right?
Each one of those hold-down posts were separated by an explosive nut.
Okay.
That blew
Little
the nut
frangible nut that would...
A frangible nut,
Yep.
right. Okay. At T0, the signal is to blow all of those nuts and ignite the 2 solid rocket motors
yep.
were sent at the same time.
Okay.
All of them.
No
Because
kidding.
you knew once you light the SRBs, you can't shut them down, you want them out of there.
Right?
Once you blow those nuts, you can't stop that, you want it out of there.
You don't want the rocket sitting on the pad with no nuts holding it down, but
Right.
the engine's not on.
Or with the engines on and the nuts
trying to hold it down.
Trying to hold it down
Yeah.
and strip them out.
Gotcha. So it's just one
So
signal
just one signal does it all.
You're going.
Yeah.
So, God, let's see if we can speed around a couple questions here, because again, y'all, I know there's so many questions. Y'all have so many good questions for us. Let me scroll through and see here. It's during the greatest period of space travel. All right, let's see what you think about this one. How do you feel when you get to come here and share your experiences in what I think a lot of people would say is the greatest period of space travel? Going to the moon, putting people into orbit for the first time, like all that.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it? I enjoy doing it.
You
for
enjoy
one
it?
thing. Yeah. My wife says I am now a professional BSer. Which is partially true.
Partially true. I mean, me too. I guess I'll take that. So.
And yeah, I enjoy doing it, and I feel that I'm still contributing to the space program.
You absolutely are.
By publicizing. If
Absolutely.
nothing else.
And also answering questions for us, sharing your time with us.
Yeah.
There may be somebody watching the show right now.
And I've had a lot of comments about my enthusiasm for the space program.
Yeah.
And I think all that contributes to the promotion of it.
It really does. I mean, I can't say enough thank you for the time today.
Well, you're welcome. I don't need your thanks. I just, I'm glad you're doing stuff like
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
One of the reasons we're doing it is because we did it.
Yep.
And we're the guys that worked on it. And we're getting a little long in the tooth. And we aren't going to be around forever.
Well, that's why we appreciate you spending time with us and sharing your stories and
Gets it
experiences.
recorded.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
yeah, because I'm 84 years old, or will be in November.
Right.
I'm 83. And people say, well, you don't look like you're 83. And I look in the mirror and I can see that too. But every once in a while, my body reminds me I am 83. So, like right now, my feet are hurting.
Well, see, we've been keeping you around here. We need to get you over
I've been
a
on my
break.
feet since 11 o'clock. That's why.
No kidding. How are we doing on time? I know we're about done with time here, right? Oh, we're good on time right now. Oh, we're still good on time. It was a time check, right, Chad? Right quick.
5 minutes on battery.
On battery. All right, gotcha.
Okay.
Let's see here. We're just scrolling through. I mean, there's all sorts of comments about. Well, here was actually a good one, and I'd really be interested in your feedback on this. We were in the moon race, right?
Yes.
And we have Russia, Soviet Union. We've got us going. We're trying to get to the moon. As an engineer, did you ever feel pressured to get something done quickly or something?
Yeah. I think we were
They're
just,
enthusiastic,
I think
that's
we were
okay.
just photobombed.
Yeah, that's okay. If they're excited about it, it's completely fine.
Okay. Yeah, well, of course, the moon program was part of the Cold War.
Right.
And as part of the Cold War, well, Russia was going to put men on. I think we just outspent them.
Right. Okay.
And they actually had a shuttle, too, that looked a lot like our shuttle.
Yep. It looked a lot like ours. The Buran or
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Baton, yeah. But it never really flew.
right.
So
Did you ever feel
in
like
that
you
context,
had to?
Well, you see, one thing we had to fight all the time was complacency and putting schedule above safety.
Right.
And sometimes we weren't all that successful in doing that.
Gotcha.
For instance, the Challenger
Yep.
and the Columbia.
Okay.
and there were several accidents on the ground that weren't really publicized that much.
Right.
But yeah, it was something that we had to keep in mind all the time. We had astronauts come around while we were doing work on it, looking, kind of seeing what we were doing.
Right.
That never bothered me at all.
Gotcha.
Some of the guys complained about that. I said, "Look, guys, they're going to fly on this thing. They have a right to see what we're doing.
To see what's going on, to look under the hood or whatever."
Yeah, right.
So
that's kind of my feeling on it. I think we did a pretty good job of it. Not perfect, but we did a pretty good job.
well, we got people to the moon and back safely multiple
that's right.
times. So Chad, here's a status update for you. It looks like we are about ready to do a camera battery change. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the Be Right Back screen right quick. When we come back, we will thank Jack for his time because I don't want to rush through it, right?
Okay.
And then we will talk about getting our next guest on here. But we're going to go AFK right quick. We will still have Jack here with us. Whenever we come back, we just have to swap out a camera battery. Again, we're at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. There's no S on visitors. It's not plural. It's just Visitor Complex. And we're at Cape Canaveral, Florida. It's right next to Titusville. I mean, look, you can Google it. You find it on a map. At the Saturn V Center, and we're talking with Jack. We will be right back and answer a couple more questions with y'all. Let us switch out a battery. Then we awkwardly stand here because there's about a 7-second delay. And so if I hit the button too soon, it's going to cut off what we were just saying. My phone. And when I tap my phone, that turns the camera back on. Chat, we're back. How's it going? We just had to change the battery there really quickly. Again, we've got Jack with us, a retired systems engineer from the Apollo program. I think that's the right way to say it, right? Yeah, good deal. Let us know that everything's good because it's about time for us to cut Jack loose here. Hey, I saw a couple questions while we were swapping the battery out there. We had answered them. One was, how was the Saturn rocket held down? There were those frangible nuts that were holding. Was it held down by frangible nuts? We talked about the space shuttle actually.
The shuttle was.
How was this held down?
It's got 4 hold down posts.
Okay.
And it had an arm that went over like this and held it down.
And like clamped it down?
Yeah, until there was a piece of ordnance inside each hold down post that would blow and cause that
to open up and move away.
Let it go.
Can you see those on here? Or
they're not on here.
They're not on here.
Right up there where that blue thing is stuck into the side, right in that area, was is a pad that hold it up. And there's one every 90 degrees.
Gotcha.
And
so in between each engine, I guess.
And it unfortunately it's not. And I didn't know a whole lot about that particular system.
It looks like they're using that structural mounting point to actually hold the rocket up right now.
It is. And I went online and Googled the hold-down system for the Saturn V and didn't get any satisfaction.
Didn't have a lot of information. We'll have to maybe document that and put it online somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And let's see here. There was one other question that I think we saw. Is this a real rocket? And the answer is?
Yes.
It's a real
rocket. The reason it never flew. The reason it didn't fly is because Apollo 18, 19, and 20 were canceled.
Yep.
They'd already built the hardware to fly it.
Yep. This isn't a mock-up. This isn't like a fiberglass. It's all empty inside. This is mostly actual flight hardware behind us right now.
Right.
It could have gone to the moon if we had continued the Apollo program.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. So, chat, again, what I want y'all to do is say thank you to Jack here. Again, Jack has spent over an hour with us, walking around,
Really?
talking to us about the Saturn V rocket here at the Saturn V Center. Jack, I want to shake your hand. I really do appreciate
Okay, well, thank you. I enjoyed doing it.
Excellent. I really do appreciate the time that you spent with us and sharing your stories and that sort of stuff. Any other thing, any parting words you want to leave us with?
No, just remember this, that there's a lot of money spent on doing this. There wasn't a single dime spent in space. It was all spent right down here on the
It's all
Earth.
spent right here. Because there's people on the ground that are building things, moving things.
So economically, it was a huge factor, I think, economically.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I've never heard it put that way before, but that makes perfect sense. There's nobody in space taking the money for it.
Nope.
It's all down here on the ground.
It's all down here on the ground.
That's an excellent point. So here's what we've got here. I told them to say thank you, and they're going to put some thanks in chat, little hearts, and there's a picture of Pluto in there and that sort of stuff. Everybody's saying thank you, Jack, right there.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
The last trick as we go away, chat, I'm going to go ahead and start the camera down here just briefly. I want y'all to say where you're from. Where are you watching from right now? And then I'll share that with Jack when we're switching out microphones and stuff. Again, don't go anywhere. Jack, again, thank you again for the time here today, teaching us about the Saturn V. We will be right back one more time. Y'all tell us where we're from in the meantime, and we will be back with more artifacts. We're going over to the treasure gallery next. So, Jack, one more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't shake your hand enough.